What happens to your fat loss right after a high carb meal? Does it come to a screeching halt? Does it change your whole dynamic of how your body uses fuel? In some ways it does. We're gonna take a little walkthrough of what happens after you ingest a bunch of carbohydrates. Good, bad, and other. After today's video, I put a link down below for Thrive Market. That is a 30% off discount link plus a free gift. So 30% off your entire grocery order. The thing I like about Thrive Market is they're trying to help get gnarly processed foods out of people's fridge and out of people's pantries. So these are healthier for you options, better for you options, and the prices are highly, highly competitive. So a lot of times you're gonna find prices cheaper than the grocery store and it's delivered directly to your doorstep. So when it comes to like recalibrating your pantry, Thrive Market really is solid. It's very helpful to be able to have all your grocery shopping at your fingertips so you're not stressed about finding the right things. You can search. You can do a quick search for gluten-free. You can do a search for paleo. You can do a search for sugar-free, for keto, for this, for that, all at your fingertips, and then it's delivered directly to your doorstep. But let's be real, we're all pinching some pennies, so the best thing about it is that 30% off discount link off your entire grocery order using that link down below. I use my Thrive box consistently. I'm always changing up stuff. I'm always getting a Thrive order coming in a couple times per month, and it helps save me a bunch of money, but it also gets me some really cool stuff that I otherwise wouldn't find at the grocery store. So check them out in the top line of the description underneath this video. Carbohydrates are not the enemy here. Okay, I consume carbohydrates. I periodically cycle in and out of keto. I'm not saying they're bad, but we do need to understand the physiological shifts that occur and even the metabolic shifts. Okay. The key determinant of if we are going to use carbs as a fuel source is the level of carbs in our body. Okay, our body is going to prefer to use carbs if those carbs are present, right? If we are eating carbs, you can bet your bottom dollar the body is going to want to utilize them. Okay, if you are predominantly eating fats and not a lot of carbohydrates, then yes, your body might preferentially start leaning into the fats. So there are some systems that take place because our bodies really shouldn't be having high levels of glucose and high levels of fats in the bloodstream at the same time. It doesn't typically work like that. So right when we consume a carbohydrate, our pancreatic beta cells produce insulin. Okay, we've all heard of insulin before, but what that insulin does is it goes around and it opens the cellular gateway. It opens the doors of the cell to allow the carbohydrates that we just consumed in. Pretty cool, right? Yes, that's awesome. Okay, and one of the first things it does is it allows our peripheral tissues, our muscles, everything throughout the course of the body, our tissues, to soak up the carbohydrates. And it does this by encouraging what's called GLUT4 translocation. So GLUT4 is like a big net that catches the carbohydrates. It usually lives inside of a cell, but once insulin comes a-knocking, that GLUT4 comes to the surface of the cell, casts a big net, and starts grabbing the carbohydrates to improve and increase what is called glycogenesis, where we take carbohydrates and we store them as glycogen. This is a phenomenal thing, and it makes it so our blood sugar doesn't go sky high. But if we're not insulin sensitive, this doesn't happen very well. But we're talking about in a normally, semi-healthy person here. The next thing that happens is the liver level. We go through hepatic glycogenesis, where the liver takes up carbohydrates and stores them as glycogen. Again, a phenomenal thing. Now remember, when we are just using fuel, like our storage fuel, our stored form of carbohydrates, the first part that your body is going to burn through is going to be the liver glycogen. Do not believe stuff out there that says like you immediately start pulling from your muscle glycogen. Your body will deplete your liver glycogen before it really has a strong desire to burn through the muscle glycogen. The muscle glycogen will replete the liver glycogen, meaning the muscle glycogen, those carbohydrates, they don't go immediately into the cell, they go into the tissue, or they go into the bloodstream, and then they go into the liver, and then so they kind of go through like a staging. Okay, anyhow, that's not the point here. The next piece that's very important, okay, the carbohydrates will bring lipolysis to a stop. Okay, what does that mean? It does mean that when you consume carbohydrates, you have a temporary stop in fatty acid oxidation. That doesn't mean that you won't lose weight, but it does slow down the rate in which you are utilizing fats as a fuel source. So does that mean that fat loss comes to a screeching halt? In some ways, kind of. When you do consume the carbohydrates, it is going to slow that process down, okay? Because what ends up happening is the insulin binds to an insulin receptor on the fat cell. okay? And here's kind of what happens within that category. So like the insulin comes in, it binds to the fat cell, and yeah, it stops the fat from being liberated into the bloodstream, but there's a deeper process that occurs. When the insulin binds to the fat cell, it activates something called protein kinase B. This protein kinase B then blocks what is called cyclic adenosine monophosphate. Cyclic adenosine monophosphate is what would allow protein kinase A to allow hormone-sensitive lipase to liberate fatty acids off of the glyceride backbone from a triglyceride. That is brain exploding. Okay, essentially what that means is we cannot burn fat outside of hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase acts upon a fat cell to allow it to be liberated. If we are stopping hormone-sensitive lipase, we are stopping the liberation of fats. So fats no longer get liberated into the bloodstream. That does not mean that we're not ever going to lose weight, but it does mean that right when insulin is activated, the fat liberation does come to a screeching halt. Additionally, we have an increase in lipoprotein lipase, or LPL. Lipoprotein lipase encourages a fat cell to take in more fat. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means when you're consuming a bunch of carbohydrates with a bunch of fats, you have an insulin spike that is making it so that lipoprotein lipase could take those fatty acids from what you just ate and soak them up more. Now, there's a lot of disbelief behind that. Some people will say combining fats and carbs isn't that big of a deal, and in moderation, it really isn't. But when you start looking at cakes and pies and things like that that all have a bunch of sugar and a bunch of fat, yeah, you could probably guess that this could be happening. So when you eat a carbohydrate, your body is going to do what it can to allocate the carbohydrates properly, burn them if necessary, slow down fatty acid utilization so it can prioritize the carbs, and that could be slowing down your fat loss. That does not mean, and again, I'll say it again, that you should avoid carbohydrates. If you're doing keto, that's a different discussion, okay? But you do have to remember that consistently munching on carbohydrates throughout the day might be getting in the way of how your body utilizes fat. You can still lose weight, but you might not be losing the right kind of weight. Okay, so pay attention to that, monitor the signs, and there you go. I'll see you tomorrow.